My name is Lily Harper, and I was 28 years old when I realized some families do not need strangers to humiliate you because they will do it themselves for free. It happened on Christmas night in a house full of warm lights, polished dishes, and the kind of fake laughter that only comes out when people are performing happiness for an audience. I had barely stepped fully into the living room before my younger brother threw an arm around his girlfriend, looked straight at me with that smug little smile he had perfected over the years, and said, "This is the failure of our family." The room burst into laughter so fast it almost felt rehearsed. My father laughed first. My stepmother followed. Even the people who did not know me smiled politely, like cruelty was just another holiday tradition in that house. I stood there holding a serving tray, still wearing the apron I had been handed the second I walked through the door. And for a few seconds, I honestly thought nothing in me reacted anymore. Not anger, not shame, not even surprise. Just a kind of cold silence I had been building for years without realizing it. Then I set the tray down, reached into my pocket, and sent one short message. I did not defend myself. I did not argue. I did not remind anyone of all the things they did not know. I just waited. Less than 5 minutes later, my brother's phone rang. He answered with a grin that slowly disappeared as the voice on the other end spoke. By the time he pulled the phone away from his ear, the color had drained from his face. And for the first time in my life, that room went quiet for me. Before I tell you what he heard on that call and why that Christmas dinner changed everything, tell me this. Where are you listening from today? And what time is it where you are right now? I really want to know how far this story reaches. The truth is, that Christmas dinner did not begin on Christmas. It began years earlier, back when my mother was still alive, and our house still felt like a place where I could breathe. She died when I was 14. Breast cancer. Fast, brutal, and quiet in the way tragedies often are when they move into a family and rearrange everything without asking permission. One year, I still had a mother who tucked notes into my lunch bag and rubbed my shoulders when I stayed up too late studying. The next year, I was standing in a black dress beside a casket, listening to adults say I was strong, when what they really meant was that I was not allowed to fall apart in front of them. My father did not stay alone for long. 6 months later, he remarried a woman with polished nails, a bright smile, and a way of speaking to me that always sounded sweet until I replayed her words later and realized every sentence had a blade hidden inside it. She moved into our house with fresh curtains, scented candles, and a son who was younger than me by 3 years, and instantly treated like the center of the universe. Tyler was loud, athletic, charming when he wanted to be, and almost frighteningly good at sensing which version of himself people wanted so he could become it on command. My father lit up around him in a way I had not seen since before my mother got sick. Suddenly, the house had a new rhythm. Tyler had football camp, new cleats, birthday parties with rented bounce houses, and every excuse in the world when he messed up. I had chores, hand-me-down clothes from church drives, and lectures about attitude. If I so much as asked why he never had to clear his own plate, my stepmother would watch him tearing through the kitchen in muddy shoes and laugh, like boys were just naturally wild. Then she would turn to me and say, "Lily, you are the girl in this house. Start acting like it." She said it the way some people say grace before dinner, like a ritual nobody was supposed to question. At first, I kept trying. I tried being helpful. I tried being quiet. I tried making myself useful enough that maybe my father would look at me and remember I was his daughter too. But usefulness became my trap. If dinner needed cooking, I did it. If laundry needed folding, I did it. If relatives were visiting and the house needed to look perfect, I was the one wiping counters, while Tyler sat in the living room talking about football stats with my father like they were best friends, and not a man and a boy learning how male approval works in America. every time I looked up, he was being handed something I was told I had not earned. A new phone, a school trip, money for a team fundraiser. My stepmother called him gifted. My father called him a natural leader. The first time I asked to join an after-school art program, my stepmother looked at the flyer, then looked at me and asked, "Who exactly is supposed to help me here if you are off drawing little pictures?" My father never said no directly. He had a habit that was worse. He would sigh, lean back, and say, "Not now, Lily. Tyler has a lot going on this season." As if my life kept needing to move aside for his. As if everything in that house revolved around protecting his momentum. At dinner, the best cuts of meat somehow landed on Tyler's plate first. On Christmas mornings, he opened more gifts and bigger ones, while I learned to make my face look grateful over scarves, notebooks, and practical things. My stepmother liked to praise him in front of people. She would say, "Tyler is going to do something big one day." Then she would glance at me and add, "Lily is still finding herself." It became the family language. Tyler was promise, I was delay. Tyler was confidence, I was compliance. I was the one people expected to adjust. There is something very dangerous about hearing the same version of yourself repeated for years inside your own home. Eventually, you stop arguing with it. You start wearing it. By the time I turned 17, I had already learned how to make myself smaller at the dinner table, softer in conversation, easier to overlook. That was how peace worked in our house. Tyler got brighter, I got quieter. And the worst part was not that they treated him like the future, it was that they needed me to become the comparison that made him look even better. By the time Tyler hit high school, the pattern in our house was so established that nobody even bothered hiding it anymore. He did not just get support, he got narrative. Everything about him was packaged, like the beginning of a success story people wanted to be close to. Friday nights were for his football games, Saturdays were for replaying his highlights to anyone willing to listen, Sundays were for talking about college scouts and potential and how some kids were simply born with drive. If I did well on a test, my father would say, "That is good, keep it up." If Tyler had an average game and still lost, my stepmother would say, "He is learning resilience. He is going to come back stronger." I was measured by outcomes. He was protected by interpretation. That difference shapes a person more than most people realize. When I was 16, my school counselor pulled me aside after class and told me I had a strong portfolio for a state summer arts program. It was competitive, but she said I had a real shot. I came home that afternoon more excited than I had been in months. I remember standing in the kitchen while my stepmother chopped celery for a casserole and my father scrolled through something on his phone. I laid the application form on the counter and started explaining the scholarship options before I lost my nerve. My stepmother barely glanced at it. My father asked what dates the program ran. When I told him, he frowned and said that overlapped with Tyler's regional football camp. I did not understand the connection until my stepmother said, "Well, we cannot split the budget right now, and we definitely cannot be in two places at once. Tyler's camp matters for his future. You can do art anytime." That was the moment I understood they did not see my dreams as time-sensitive or worthy of real investment. Tyler's interests were always developing into something important. Mine were always hobbies waiting to be postponed. The same thing happened over and over. He got driving lessons in a newer truck because he needed confidence on the road. I rode the bus because it was good for me to learn responsibility. He got tutoring before finals because pressure hit athletes hard. I got told to study at the kitchen table after the dishes were done. On his 18th birthday, my father gave him tickets to a Texans game and a watch he could not stop showing off. That same year, I asked whether I could replace my dying laptop before senior year since I needed it for design assignments and college applications. My stepmother told me to try the public library more often and maybe learn not to rely so much on convenience. She said that while Tyler was upstairs playing video games on a flat screen that had been bought for him because he had been stressed after a tough season. The emotional gaslighting was almost worse than the money. If I got frustrated, I was sensitive. If I pointed out something unfair, I was dramatic. If I withdrew, they told people I was difficult to connect with. Tyler understood the system very early. He learned he could say almost anything to me as long as he smiled after in front of friends. He liked introducing me with little jokes. "This is my sister Lily. She is into artsy stuff, still figuring life out." Or, "Lily is the reason my parents pray so hard for my future." People laughed because he was handsome and easygoing, and because family cruelty is often invisible when it is wrapped in charisma. I wish I could say I fought back every time, but I did not. Not because I was weak, because no one in that house ever rewarded truth. They rewarded the version of reality that kept Tyler looking golden and everyone else comfortable. The more he was praised, the more casual his cruelty became. He began treating my failures as entertainment before I had even failed at anything. At dinner, he would talk about how some people were just built for real pressure and others were not. My father never asked him to stop. My stepmother sometimes laughed and said, "Tyler, be nice." But she said it the same way people comment on the weather, without any real intention behind it. And somewhere inside that atmosphere of jokes and favoritism and polished family lies, I started believing something deeply poisonous. I started believing that maybe love was something you had to outperform someone else to deserve. That maybe if I were more impressive, more confident, more naturally easy to brag about, my father would finally stop looking through me. But homes like that do not work that way. They do not want the neglected child to rise. They want her to stay just wounded enough to keep the hierarchy intact. Tyler was not only being lifted up, he was being taught that my smallness was part of his inheritance. I still remember the day my acceptance letter came from the state university in Texas, because for a few minutes I felt taller than I had in years. It was not some elite private school, and the envelope itself was thin and plain, but it contained something that felt almost holy to me at the time, a way out. I had been accepted into a design and communications program with a partial scholarship, and I must have read the letter 10 times before taking it downstairs. My hands were shaking. I knew better than to expect a dramatic celebration, but I still hoped for something, a smile, a hug, a sentence that sounded like pride. My father read the first page, nodded once, and handed it back to me. "That is good," he said. Then he asked whether the scholarship covered housing. I told him not fully, but I could work and maybe take out a small loan. He exchanged a glance with my stepmother that I understood immediately. Tyler had just gotten into a private university outside Dallas on a sports-linked admissions track, and they had already decided where the money would go. He needed the dorm package, the meal plan, the better laptop, the truck to get back and forth after his first year, all of it. They did not say, "Lily, we cannot afford both of you right now." They said something much more destructive. My stepmother put a hand on my shoulder and told me this was actually a great chance for me to learn independence, because not every kid benefits from the traditional college experience unless they are really ready. My father said Tyler had more momentum right now, and it made sense to invest where the return would be strongest. Return, that was the word he used. Like parenthood was venture capital, and I had already tested below expectation. So I did what kids like me always do. I adjusted. I enrolled anyway. I found a cheap room to rent with 2 other girls near a bus line. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop and picked up weekend shifts at a diner when rent got tight. I told myself this was temporary, that hardship would build character, that maybe one day I would look back and feel proud I had done it without help. What I did not realize then was how different resilience looks when you are climbing uphill without a safety net, while your own family keeps moving the road. College was not what broke me. The constant friction did. The bus rides before sunrise, the shifts that ran late enough to leave my feet throbbing during lectures, the group projects with classmates who had parents paying their car insurance while I was counting quarters for laundry. I tried to keep up, I really did.
I carried a sketchbook and a planner, and this stubborn belief that if I kept going long enough, effort would eventually turn into stability.
But my housing situation fell apart halfway through my second semester when the landlord announced he was selling the property. I had 30 days to move, almost no savings, and a class load that was already hanging by a thread. I called my father and asked if I could come home for a few months while I figured something out. He did not say yes or no right away. He asked whether I had considered that maybe college was not the best fit for me after all. My stepmother got on the phone and told me that pushing myself into environments that clearly overwhelmed me was not brave, it was stubborn. Then she said something I never forgot. Tyler is built for high-pressure paths. You are better when life is simpler. As if my limitations were a fact of nature and not the result of years of neglect. I withdrew 2 weeks later, not because I was incapable, because I could not solve every problem with grit alone. I packed my clothes into trash bags and moved into a tiny efficiency apartment over a 24-hour diner where the walls shook whenever the industrial freezer kicked on downstairs. The place smelled like old grease and detergent, and the mattress leaned in the middle like it had given up on itself. But it was what I could afford. I cried exactly once that first night, and even then it felt less like grief than humiliation. Tyler texted me before midnight. Heard you dropped out, knew it was only a matter of time. Do us all a favor and do not turn this into another pity thing. I stared at that message until the screen went dark. He was already talking about me the way people talk about a cautionary tale that proves their worldview. I became the daughter who could not hack it, the sister who had potential but wasted it, the example my father and stepmother used whenever they wanted to make Tyler look even more disciplined by comparison. What none of them understood was that something in me had not died in that little apartment. Something had finally stopped asking their permission. When you lose the version of your life you were told would save you, you either collapse under the shame, or you start building with whatever is still left in your hands. I had no degree, no family support, no trust fund I could access, and no one rushing in to rescue me. What I did have was anger, talent, and more tolerance for hard work than any of them had ever bothered to notice. The apartment above that diner should have felt like the bottom of my life, but in a strange way, it was the first place that was fully mine. Nobody there knew my history, nobody compared me to Tyler, nobody asked why I was not more like the child my father actually liked bragging about. I worked morning shifts at a coffee shop 3 days a week, late shifts at the diner on weekends, and everything in between went toward figuring out how to turn what I knew into something people would pay for. At first, it was small and borderline embarrassing. I designed a logo for a local barbecue stand that was trying to look less like a place people only visited after high school games. I made flyers for a mobile car wash guy who paid me in cash and smoked through the entire consultation. I built a basic social package for a nail salon owner who kept apologizing that she could not offer more than a few $100s. I said yes to everything, not because I lacked standards, but because survival does not care about dignity in neat little stages. Every client taught me something. Every cheap project forced me to sharpen faster. I spent nights watching free tutorials on branding, digital ad strategy, search optimization, audience psychology, content planning, and campaign analytics. I borrowed books from the public library until the librarians started recognizing me. I learned how small businesses think because I was working with people who could not afford pretty mistakes. They needed results, not theory. One of my first real wins came from a family-owned barbecue place near downtown Houston. Their food was incredible, but their online presence looked like it had been abandoned in 2012. I offered them a low-cost rebrand package with new visuals, better menu photography, local ad targeting, and a social campaign built around football weekends and neighborhood loyalty. Within 2 months, their weekend sales jumped hard enough that the owner hugged me in the parking lot while crying into his apron. That was the first time in years somebody looked at my work and treated it like value instead of a phase. Word spread, then more word spread. Local businesses talk, especially in cities where reputation travels faster than advertising budgets.
I picked up a sporting goods store, a boutique fitness studio, a contractor who wanted to look big enough to bid higher jobs.
Then a regional client with real money and expectations that scared me in the best possible way. Around that time, I met Marcus Hale, through a referral chain that started with one of my smaller accounts. He was everything Tyler liked pretending to be: calm under pressure, genuinely strategic, impossible to impress with noise, and very good at spotting capability in people who were used to being underestimated. He had spent years in brand operations and business development and was leaving an agency partnership that no longer fit him. Our first meeting was supposed to be 45 minutes. We stayed for nearly 3 hours, scribbling frameworks on coffee shop napkins and talking about what made modern agencies feel fake, bloated, and disconnected from real clients. Marcus did not talk over me. He did not repackage my ideas in a deeper voice and call them leadership. He listened, then he pushed, then he listened again. It was one of the most respectful conversations I had ever had with a man. Over the next year, we collaborated project by project until the line between partnership and company became impossible to ignore. We launched Apex Creative Group, with Marcus as the public-facing chief executive because he liked the front of the room and I did not. I built systems, creative architecture, client strategy, internal workflows, and the kind of operational discipline people assume only comes from corporate pedigrees. Marcus opened doors. I built what came through them. We structured the company carefully, and because most of the original capital came from my client base, my retained accounts, and my decision to reinvest everything instead of paying myself comfortably, I became majority shareholder. Very few people outside legal and finance knew the full ownership breakdown. That was not about secrecy for drama. It was a boundary. I had spent enough of my life being interpreted by people who only valued visible titles. I did not need public applause. I needed control. At family gatherings, when anyone bothered asking what I did, my father would say, "Lily does freelance design stuff." He always made it sound temporary, flimsy, and slightly embarrassing. Tyler had graduated by then and was walking around with the confidence of a man who had always assumed the world would organize itself around his potential. He talked about networking, brand culture, leadership pipelines, and market visibility like he had invented ambition. My stepmother repeated every update to relatives as if his career were a national achievement. They all had the same blind spot. They assumed that because I was not loud, I was still lost. They did not know that while they were still telling people I had never recovered from dropping out, I had built a company strong enough to hire staff, expand accounts, and shape campaigns across the region. They definitely did not know that one day, Tyler would apply to work there and walk straight into a building I owned. Tyler did not get into Apex because he was brilliant. He got in because men like him are often trained from childhood to turn confidence into access. He met someone at an alumni event, followed up twice, polished his resume with all the right language, and managed to land an interview for a mid-level brand strategy role. Marcus handled it. By the time the candidate packet came across internal review, I recognized the name immediately and sat back in my chair for a long time, staring at the screen while old anger and new opportunity met in the same place. Marcus looked up from the file and asked if I wanted him rejected outright. I said no, not because I was generous, because I wanted to see what happened when Tyler entered a space where my standards, not my father's excuses, set the rules. Tyler started at Apex like he had been cast in a movie about future executives. Crisp shirts, expensive watch, over-rehearsed confidence, smiling too hard at people he thought mattered, and barely noticing people he thought did not. He did not recognize me the first week because I was not introduced as founder or owner. To him, I was another senior strategist moving between meetings with a laptop and no need to impress him. The irony amused me more than I expected. The boy who had spent years reducing me to family trivia could stand in a conference room shaped by my work and still fail to really see me. He recognized me fully after a few days and had the decency to look startled, but not enough humility to adjust. Instead, he recalibrated in the office. He acted like our connection was casual. Outside closed doors, he treated me with that same old edge.
He told coworkers stories about his sister, who had tried college, flamed out, and was now doing okay in some design support capacity. He never quite lied directly. He did something worse. He arranged the truth into a version that made him look superior and me look safely small.
Mia came into the picture around the same time. She was smart, stylish, and initially easier to like than I wanted her to be. Tyler paraded her through his life as proof he was leveling up. He posted the right dinners, the right rooftop drinks, the right captions about building a future with someone who matched his vision. He had always loved an audience. Apex gave him a new one. For a few months, he performed well enough to stay unremarkable. Then he got impatient. That was always his flaw. Praise had trained him to expect upward motion on schedule. When it did not come quickly enough, he started manufacturing it. The first sign was subtle. He began speaking too confidently in meetings about concepts he had not developed. Then one of our designers mentioned Tyler had asked for access to folders outside his project scope. Then an analyst flagged irregular budget notations on a vendor reconciliation sheet. None of it was dramatic by itself, but patterns rarely announce themselves all at once. They gather, they repeat, they wait for someone who understands systems to notice them. I noticed. So did Marcus. We watched quietly. We did not confront him early because people like Tyler are most revealing when they think they're getting away with it. Then one Tuesday morning, he posted on LinkedIn about a breakthrough campaign he was proud to have led. My stomach dropped the second I saw the images. The concept, visual hierarchy, emotional framing, and even pieces of the copy structure came directly from a strategy deck I had drafted weeks earlier for an internal pitch. He had not improved it. He had stolen it. Worse, he had stolen it badly, in that arrogant way people do when they think the real creator has no power. Marcus came into my office 10 minutes later carrying a printout and closed the door behind him. We started pulling logs. Tyler had accessed folders outside authorization, downloaded source files, renamed versions, and deleted 2 support documents he thought would erase the trail. He had also submitted vague consulting reimbursements to a shell vendor setup that routed money back into an account linked to him. Small amounts at first, enough to stay below casual scrutiny, enough to finance things that fed his image. A custom ring, new truck payments, high-end dinners he wanted Mia posting online. The theft was not just professional, it was psychological. He was still doing what he had always done, taking what I built, reducing what I survived, and using both to decorate himself. One of the younger staff members came to Marcus with screenshots from team chats where Tyler joked about having to rescue his sister's half-baked ideas because she had never really learned how strategy worked. That part landed harder than the money. It was not just that he stole from me, it was that he still needed me beneath him while benefiting from my work. Marcus asked again whether I wanted him terminated privately. I said no. For the first time in my life, I did not want quiet resolution. I wanted proportion. We spent days building the file. Access records, timestamps, reimbursements, deleted document recovery, internal witness statements, chat screenshots, and enough corroboration to make any legal team feel comfortable. Then a second truth surfaced, uglier and older. While reviewing old financial records connected to some paperwork my aunt had once mentioned after my mother died, I found traces of a custodial education account in my name that had been nearly drained during the exact years Tyler's private tuition, housing, and vehicle costs were covered. The pattern was too clean to ignore. It felt like being hit by the past and present in the same place. Tyler had not just grown up favored, he had grown up funded with pieces of a future that had originally been mine. That was when the Christmas dinner stopped being a family event on my calendar and became a reckoning. When I drove to my father's house on Christmas Eve, I already knew exactly who everyone believed they were in that story. Tyler was the success. Mia was the proof his life looked impressive from the outside. My father and stepmother were the proud architects of a thriving son, and I was still the cautionary side note they could use to make him shine brighter.
The house looked like a magazine spread when I walked in. Garland on the staircase, expensive glass ornaments on the tree, candles lit in every room, and that same old arrangement of rolls waiting for me before I had even taken my coat off. My stepmother handed me an apron and asked me to help plate appetizers because Mia was coming and everything needed to look nice. Not because I was a guest, because in that house I had always been part daughter, part unpaid staff. Tyler arrived late on purpose, making an entrance with Mia on his arm and the confidence of a man who had never once imagined a room might turn against him. Everyone fussed over them. My father opened bourbon, my stepmother nearly glowed. Then Tyler saw me standing near the dining room, and that smug little smile appeared. He wrapped an arm around Mia and said loudly, "This is my sister Lily, the failure of our family." The laughter came fast. My father nodded like it was true. My stepmother added something about me still finding my way. Mia gave an awkward little smile, the kind strangers use when they can sense something is wrong, but do not yet understand the depth of it. I felt the old humiliation rise, but it did not control me this time. I set the serving tray down, took out my phone, and sent Marcus a message we had already planned for. Do it now. Less than 5 minutes later, Tyler's phone rang. He answered casually, expecting some work-related holiday ego stroke. Instead, I watched every bit of color leave his face. Marcus's voice was calm, direct, and final. "Tyler, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. HR and legal will contact you regarding theft of intellectual property, fraudulent reimbursements, and evidence destruction." The room went silent. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Tyler started talking over the call, insisting there had to be some misunderstanding, but Marcus did not raise his voice. He just told him to check the television. I had already mirrored the evidence file from my phone. The screen lit up with access logs, draft histories, reimbursement trails, screenshots, and enough recovered deck after another, proving Tyler had stolen campaign material he had never created. Then came the line that hit hardest. Apex ownership structure. My name, majority shareholder. Mia stepped away from Tyler, like the air around him had changed. My father kept saying impossible under his breath, as if disbelief could rewrite records. My stepmother stared at me with that stunned expression people get when the person they train themselves not to see suddenly becomes undeniable. Tyler tried to recover by turning mean, which was the most Tyler thing he could have done. He said I had baited him, manipulated the system, and always been jealous because he was the one our father believed in. I remember looking at him and realizing that was the truest thing he had ever said. He had built his whole identity on being believed more easily than I was, and now that advantage was gone. The next morning, my father and stepmother came to my place with a folder, a check, and the tone people use when they want to bury a crime inside the word family. They offered me a property share and early inheritance if I agreed not to pursue anything further. Buried in the paperwork were references to accounts linked to my mother's estate and an education fund that had been under my father's control while I was a minor. My Aunt Diane arrived not long after with copied bank statements she had rushed to obtain.
That was how the truth finally came into full view. The money used to elevate Tyler had not just come from household sacrifice. A large portion had come from assets my mother and her parents had intended for me. My father had used guardianship access to drain what was supposed to help secure my future, then spent years telling me I lacked discipline when the truth was that he had cut the floor out from under me and called my fall a character flaw. My stepmother did not even deny it cleanly. She said Tyler had more potential at the time, and they had to make practical choices. Practical. I laughed in a way that scared even me. Then I tore the offer in half and told them they did not get to buy silence with pieces of what they had already stolen. Tyler and my father tried one last ugly move after that. Anonymous posts, industry gossip, vague accusations online meant to make me look unstable and vindictive.
But this time, I had lawyers, records, and a life that did not depend on their version of me. Cease and desist letters went out. The posts disappeared. Clients who mattered stayed because when asked for truth, I had documentation instead of drama. Tyler was blacklisted from reputable agency work. Mia left quietly within weeks. My father and stepmother got pulled into financial review over irregular account handling and tax exposure they had assumed would stay buried forever. Their social world shrank. Their confidence shrank with it. I did not celebrate publicly. I did something better. I blocked every number, every email, every account. I stopped feeding the machine that required me to stay wounded so they could keep their story. 1 year later, I hosted Christmas in a different home, with people who had never once asked me to become smaller for their comfort. We made too much food, laughed too loudly, and spent the afternoon delivering care packages through a local food bank because I wanted the holiday to mean something other than hierarchy and humiliation. That is the part I carry now. Not the moment Tyler was fired, not even the shock on my father's face when he realized who I had become. What stays with me is the lesson that took almost 3 decades to learn. Blood is not permission. Family is not ownership. And love that only exists when you stay beneath someone is not love at all. If you have ever been cast as the failure in somebody else's story, please hear me when I say this. Sometimes the role was never yours. Sometimes it was written for you by people who needed your silence to protect their lives. Walking away from that is not cruelty. It is self-respect. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is how healing begins. And building a life rooted in honesty, work, and dignity will always matter more than being chosen as the favorite in a dishonest home. I learned that too late to save my childhood, but not too late to save the rest of my life.